All right, we are live. Hello, and welcome to
What's up,
Couch
you
Pundits
guys?
Sports. My name is Arsh Malhotra. I am your host for today, and I am joined by Jamie Shaw, or as he's known on Instagram, Jamie Shaw Racing. If you guys haven't checked him out, his links will be in the description. You can go check him out later. But we're glad to have Jamie on the stream. Jamie, today we'll be talking about the entire Brazilian weekend. I mean, it was an interesting weekend to say the least. we had a lot, we had a lot going on. What are your
Definitely.
takes? Sorry?
Definitely for such a short track. It caused quite a lengthy weekend, one that we'll remember. Quite a few points, I would say, starting all the way from free practice, Mercedes being so strong and
Oh, yeah.
dominating. Yeah.
And what are your takes on how would you rate this weekend based on the other 22? I mean, 21, because we're having 20 actually, because we're having the 22nd race this weekend.
Quite interesting. The thing is, what I've noticed so far, across seasons is that the closer we get to the end, the more drivers are, I would say a little relieved when it comes to where they stand in the constructors. Of course, there is a battle towards the end, I'm sure. But what I've noticed basically when it comes to their driving is they get a little more, I would say, all out, if I can use a more family friendly word for
For
it.
sure.
So yeah, so we've seen like so much great action all throughout, even in the sprint, Like I was saying, for such a short track, like which is one that is very free flowing, I would say the corners, everything, the way they move, the way the cars, can travel through the track with the new regulations, etc. It was a bomb weekend. I would say it was a great weekend.
And how do you rate Interlagos as a track from the other circuits?
So, my top circuit is Silverstone. I wouldn't say anything comes close, but right after that, for me personally, would be Sao Paulo.
Would be
Just
Sao
because,
Paulo, right?
yeah, just because of, I would say, it includes a lot of, it's just everything when it comes to the camber of the track, the tilt, the elevations, etc. When you're sitting so low to the ground, you can't actually see the corners ahead of you. So even if a car has spun, stopped, you just don't know what's coming up until you actually get there. So I would
Right.
say, like it's almost like you're racing blind, and that's what makes this track such a driver's circuit, I would say.
That's good to know. And in comparison to Silverstone, I feel it's got like, okay, fine, Silverstone has maggots here. You've got the Senna S's. Silverstone has two pit straights, the old pit straight, the front pit straight. Here you've got a very long left-hander into the pit straight. So I think that kind of balances out. But I am with you when you say Silverstone is a fast circuit, because even on the sim when I play it, I prefer driving in Silverstone for two reasons. One being it's a lot longer than
Okay.
Brazil,
Yep.
and
Very
because
long.
it's a lot longer in the sense you've got about 30 odd seconds more on the track in comparison to Brazil. So it just feels a lot better to drive.
Right.
And secondly, I think even though Brazil, it's a lot broader than Brazil in terms of track width. So even though Brazil has such high speed corners to overtake, turn one, going into turn two, going into turn three, I think Silverstone for me also would be one of my favorite, would probably be my favorite. And I'd put Sao Paulo second, Spa third. I think we see eye to eye on that. But talking about the weekend, surprising qualifying from K-Mag, shoving it up on pole.
Oh, I would say it was brilliant timing. See, you can't take it away from them saying, it's luck, etc. Motorsport is luck. Everything revolves around luck. That's why you've got 22 or 23 race weekends. You've not got one. That's the whole concept of the sport. So, yes, luck does play a role, but you have to give it to them. They timed it, they got it right. I mean, Perez was out there too, right? He could have, done something about it, but they got it right and they bloody well deserve that pole, dude. I mean, it's not been the
100%.
easiest season for them. It's not been the easiest for K-Mac going out, coming back in Formula One. What a brilliant quali, I would say. It was just so fascinating to see that, as soon as the rain came down a little bit more, uh, no one went out. And I was like, is he actually going to get that pole? Firstly, thanks to Russell. But
Russell
yeah, I
crashing.
think rain played a big role.
I think those few moments of those few minutes that passed in the pit lane with K-Mag sitting in were probably the longest of his life. He
Yeah,
would
bit
just be
true.
thinking, am I getting my first pole? Is Haas getting its first ever pole? I mean, we've seen drivers get their first pole in the past, but not so much recently have we seen a constructor receive a first pole.
Right. Very true.
At least in the last, say, I'd put it in the odd 7, 8 years, we've not seen a new constructor take pole. or at least 10 years,
Wow.
in fact. We've not seen a new constructor take pole because talking about 10 years ago, you had
Ron.
2012. Yeah, you had Red Bull dominate that season. And 2012, I think, was Vettel's season where he was fighting with the Ferraris with Alonso, and Alonso had a pretty good season that year as well. So I think from there, we've not seen a new constructor pole. So it was very nice to see a new constructor, essentially. And I'm just going to deviate here for the viewers because I'm a huge esports fan. So it's also good to see Haas doing really well in F1 esports with Thomas Rona being a rookie this year. They're fighting, currently the driver is second in this championship, going out just about I think less than 10 points behind Lucas Blakely in the McLaren. So I think it's really good to see Haas have a great year finally. And it was good to see them.
Yeah.
Good to see them get something to celebrate about.
For sure.
Moving on from sticking to quali, we'll get back to the race on how K-Mag led a couple of laps, which was brilliant to see. But moving on from quali, what do you think Red Bull or the Ferrari? I mean, Ferrari, we know what they did wrong. What do you think the Red Bulls and the Mercs could have done better in terms of either strategy or in terms of tire management for the quali?
For quali, quali was very much determined upon who's on track, who's setting the lap the last. Because simply track conditions play such a big role, through the rain, through the changing weather conditions, everything matters, everything matters. When you're, fighting so hard in, I would say, the R&D side of it to get that, that 0.1 out, what's happening on track when you set a lap in, let's say, cooler conditions is you get a lot more grip compared to super hot conditions. When you're talking about rain, so it's just a whole different ball game. The way the car works, it's completely different. The way the car is set up, because there's something called Park Ferme rules for our viewers, where you cannot touch certain things on your car, So for a team that, let's say, set up its car expecting rain, they might have done a brilliant job. We may not have that information, but this is just, again, all out of assumption that a team who's set up their car based on maybe a slightly wetter quality, a damp quality, might have got those times in, So I would say Mercedes really just outdid themselves all throughout the weekend. I mean, they might have had a really good weekend. I think it was, the first 1-2 that they've had in a very long time, So just super happy for them. And, it was a little interesting to see who might come out on top. Russell with his first win, or Lewis with his, 113th, 114th win. So, yeah.
I think Russell, speaking of Russell's first win, I think he fully deserved it. He drove like a beast all weekend. He was quick in practice. He was quick in quali. Had he not crashed, he could have probably gone for pole. He was quick on the sprint. In the sprint, even though I understand the choice of Red Bull putting Verstappen on the mediums. They were either saving a softs for Brazil, or they hoped, because it was a 24 lap sprint and the softs, at least the compound that was being used for the weekend was, I think, the C3, the C4, the C5. Would not probably last more than 20 laps. So they were hoping for some tire deg post, I think, lap 2021 into the last couple of laps, but that didn't happen. However, I think Russell kept his cool. And speaking of the race, he was so smart with the way he drove.
When you say he,
laps.
who were you
I mean
referring
Russell.
to?
I mean Russell.
Okay.
In the main race. He was so smart during the main race when you had Hamilton attacking you for a 1-2 and they were racing hard and they were racing fair. I think he kept his cool by keeping Hamilton out of the DRS range for those final laps. He asked, if I'm not wrong, he asked his race engineer to give him lap updates 4 times a lap.
Right.
So
every quarter.
Every quarter. And he divided those lap times brilliantly, 1.2, 1.3, 1.2, 1.3. And he kept his cool to the checkered flag. So what a brilliant race weekend. You can't take that away from George Russell. No matter how much of an attitude problem he's had in the past, you can't take that away, that this weekend he drove phenomenally. Speaking of Mercedes, moving on down the order, Red Bull got it pretty wrong the entire weekend, yeah?
I would say more than Red Bull getting it wrong, it was others taking advantage of Red Bull not being, I would say, 100%. That's what, I would say. So Red Bull didn't get
their mistakes, yeah.
Yeah, Red Bull didn't get it entirely wrong. I mean, there were a couple of incidents down the line I mean, Perez didn't look that strong this time. Maybe again, that there's so much that really comes into the picture, especially with setup related to just weather, what temperature it is, what you expect in the race. And we might not have this information, but it's just brilliant to think that one driver who might be doing so well for the team, one is really not doing that well. What might be the differences in the garage? Even before, earlier in the season, we saw how much of a gap Russell was creating to Lewis. And it is still a little difficult to say, although they're in the same garage, what is the difference between the driver ability compared to what they're being received as a car? Because at the end of the day, they can't run around a track, right?
Right.
So I would say Red Bull still, I would say got away with it a little bit because of the misfortune that Leclerc faced with Norris's crash, and also Sainz dealing with the tear off. It was stuck to his brake when they had that pit stop. There was a lot of smoke, and that was, it turned out to be a tear off. I think it was from one of the Mercedes cars or the Red Bull cars.
We don't know what it is with Ferrari's brake ducts and tear offs, man. Somehow or the other, they're like magnets.
I
We've
mean,
seen that this entire week, this entire year.
Yeah, true.
What would you say? What would you say Ferrari could? I mean, Ferrari did pretty well with Sainz and starting in P7, moving up to P3, and Leclerc's crash. Any thoughts on P18 to P4?
That was brilliant. I would say that was brilliant. But I'm definitely going to criticize on the fact that I thought that was not a racing incident. I mean, see, here's the thing that people might not notice that well. But whether you do something by mistake or intentionally, if you've done something that's valid for a penalty, you receive it. It's not about whether it was intentional or unintentional. So I personally feel like, maybe Norris understeering and hitting the side of Leclerc was a valid reason to give him a penalty. I think he got it. I'm not too sure if he got it, but I would say, just too unfortunate of Leclerc, crashing out that early in the race. And I thought his race was done, so I'm just glad that he was able to continue. That's all.
That is true. Honestly, it's great to see his comeback from all the way down in 18. And we've seen that in the past at Brazil. We've seen Hamilton pull off a spectacular miracle last year, starting down in P20 and moving and finishing and winning the race at his so-called adoptive home race.
I wouldn't call that very, I would say not out of the box. I mean, he did have a new engine that time. I mean, I don't mean to take credit from him. Of course, he came from the back of the grid. We've seen things like that in the past, is what I mean to say, because you're in a top team. I mean, you better come up to top 5, minimum. But for him to get out there and win, that's brilliant.
Now, speaking of a top team and coming out in top 5, again, going a bit off track, we saw Liam Lawson today take over Max Verstappen's car and put in it P5. Yo.
That's big. Yeah.
That is big for a rookie. I mean, not even a rookie. You can't even call him a rookie. You call him an F2 driver.
So the thing with
driver,
I would say that's a very good, a show as a reserve driver or as a junior driver. Again, another thing to consider is that through free practice sessions, there are a lot of different tests that teams sort of run. So your target as a driver might be super different from another target. That's the whole reason why I would say FP1 to 3 is brilliant to see how confident the driver itself is. You can sometimes make out from the way they're communicating to what they're trying to do, what they're trying to achieve. But it's not the best place or time to compare two teams, because these teams have, I would say, complete black and white objectives, especially with a newcomer, a rookie, So sometimes they're there to get the miles. Sometimes they're there to really push the drivers, see what they're capable of. Sometimes they're just there to run the car, literally.
Yeah, and we saw him push him to the limit. There was a radio today saying, "Can we push more? I'm not used to being this side of the field." But anyway, getting back to Brazil, I think the race weekend overall was probably one of the best, and we've spoken about quali. The race, sprint race, we had a sprint race this weekend, one of 3. And next year we'll have 6 for people that don't know.
Wow.
We're going to have 6 sprint weekends next year. Also, K-Mag able to hold the lead down into turn one, and not only down into turn one for the first probably 2.5 laps.
I would say I'm just sad that he crashed out in the race. It was a little too sad watching him go from pole to DNF in the race. But yeah, speaking about the sprint quali or sprint race, whatever you'd like to call it, it was I didn't expect him to fall. I mean, yes, complete backmarker team, still holding in the points P8 finish after all. Yeah, it was really good. I'm just glad that the few guys up front alongside him were smart enough to know that eventually they'd get to pass him. So
Right.
it was just a matter of patience. That was it.
And patience and tenacity is what Russell showed. There was some hard racing between
Right.
Mr. Max Verstappen and Mr. Russell George, as
Right.
he is so fondly called around the paddock. Fair but hard racing between the two of them. Yes, there
Yeah.
wasn't some not so fair racing towards the latter half of the race, which we'll get to. But what brilliant racing with Verstappen and Russell. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think there are no words to really, express what exactly went on track. You just have to watch the highlights of the race itself to understand what went down really. But it was brilliant. I mean, again, like I was at the time considering, is it only because it's a sprint race that led to the main race? Why was there this much amount of action at this track? It makes me a little curious, and I would really love to, in short, see the sprint race remain at Sao Paulo. And again, there are a few tracks that might not be on the calendar next year. There are a few tracks that might be added, etc. I'm just hoping Sao Paulo is one of them that stays, simply because it is it's just a brilliantly exciting track. That's all.
24 laps, I was at the edge of my seat.
Yeah,
And
right.
it was for us in India, it was at 1:30 in the night.
Yeah.
And I was just so happy I stayed awake.
Right.
I am so happy I stayed awake because 25 laps of not only racing up in the front, but racing down the order as well. We had some great
Definitely.
racing, quote unquote, great racing by the Alpines.
I was
in
just
the
gonna
sprint.
say.
In the sprint. And we had some great racing down by McLaren. Danny Rick made up some great positions in the sprint. Haas did brilliantly. We saw Mick Schumacher start in P12. We had some great racing, not only up in front, but all the way down.
Right.
Down the order. So sprint was really great. And I'm with you, man. Like, what a track, Sao Paulo. Interlagos, what a track. It is a brilliant one.
Brilliant track.
Brilliant. And I think, to answer your question regarding why was there so much action, it's the first time we saw the F1 new generation 2022 cars at Sao Paulo in action.
Right.
And with it having 30% less downforce, 30% less dirty air coming in to the following car, I think it was a lot easier to follow.
Okay.
And this is my opinion. I am not an F1 expert. I am not Jolyon Palmer's tech analysis. I am not Ted Kravitz. I'm none of that.
Right.
But this is just my opinion that Interlagos is a track where once you get close enough, especially down, I think, into turn 4 and down into turn 6 and 7, all the way right before the Senna S's.
Right.
I feel, especially those 3 turns, if you get close enough and you get a good exit out of the turn, you can get great overtaking opportunities. But it's all in following the front car. It's all in following the front car good enough. I think even Valtteri Bottas got onto the radio to help Zhou and said, let Zhou overtake Latifi into turn 10. He's braking early. You can follow closely and you can get a good exit and then take him down the pit straight. And I think that's exactly what happened. So I think, Interlagos would probably be because the new gen cars are so good to follow.
Right.
That's my opinion. But moving on from the sprint that had all of us out of our seats, what do you think of the hard racing that went down? Because we saw 2 safety cars. We saw 3 people get multiple penalties. We saw Alpines coming down from P18 and 19 all the way up from the double points finish.
Right.
We saw Lance Stroll get a penalty.
That's normal.
For pandering, for literally saying putting Sebastian Vettel in the wall and practically killing him.
Yeah.
Vettel's just
Didn't
like,
want to
okay.
last race.
Vettel's just like, okay. Like,
Yeah.
like, okay. Like, bro, what do I do? And Alonso also said the same thing. Alonso like, I'm happy to not race Ocon after the season, but he doesn't know what's coming his way. It'll be interesting to say the least. What are your thoughts on the main race?
I think it was, like I said, it was a brilliant race. It's just fascinating again to see that, as we close into the showdown, I would say, of the year, we've got some more and more interesting battles coming up. We've again got a little bit of heat between Hamilton and Verstappen, which very honestly, yes, it's good for media, but it's also good for, I would say, just keeping them both a little bit more lively. They're noticing each other a little bit more. I'm not saying it's nice ever to see collisions in motorsport. It's always great to see wheel to wheel action. And as a race driver, you just like Max said, he remembers something and maybe something came into picture. And just like that, I think racers remember quite a bit of things when you're on track racing. So I'm actually going to start off with the Esteban and Alonso incident. And I just want to say I'm really hoping that Ocon plays a little more fair, considering next year he's going to be up against someone who is not his favorite driver. And this year he was he was with someone who was is a two-time world champion, who's, I would say, bearing or making do with, Ocon the same way a four-time champion is making do with Daddy Stroll. So I hope that he gets a little more careful, I would say. That's a word that I wouldn't mind using over here. And that's just something I'm seeing. I'm just looking forward to now the next season when all these drivers are going to swap seats. There are going to be quite some new talents coming in, and I would say I'm looking forward to seeing who even takes that Williams seat, considering Hulkenberg is now signed with Haas. There's no place for Ricardo there either, and Mick is out of Haas, and that seat looks really tempting. But what do you think? Do you think Logan Sargent, Formula 2 driver, is going to get it?
Yeah, I think Jos Capito more or less announced it a couple of weekends ago, saying has provided Logan Sargent gets the super license points he needs, which is finishing in the top 7 in F2 this year, he's the driver for next year. It's more or less confirmed, and he's currently P3 in the championship.
Right.
He needs to finish in the top 7. And there are 2 races to go. 2 races, when I say I don't mean 2 race weekends, I mean 1 sprint and a feature. Right. So I think, it's more or less Logan Sargent's.
I would say it's still a little interesting, however much it sounds confirmed. We've seen how things change up and around in this sport. And another thing to consider is that he's P3, yes, at 136 points. Whereas the next few guys, I think the next 3, 4, 5 guys are within about a 15-point range of that.
Yeah, JD himself is at P5.
Right. So I'm hoping that JD gets P3. Maybe Logan Sargent can, just stick to P4. He's anyways getting that Formula 1 seat.
Yeah, F1 seat. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Bharat Mata ki Jai.
Yeah.
I am with you on that one. Speaking of reserve drivers, I think we've covered most of the race that happened. We've covered Lando's incident. We've covered Leclerc. We've covered Danny Rick. And
what do you think about tear-offs? Do you think tear-offs will be banned next season? We heard about something that was being used in the past, which was this sort of a pouch in the car itself where you shove your tear-offs. Actually, once you take them off, you're not allowed to throw them off your car. So do you think that we might see if something new come into picture?
You never know. These minute modifications to Formula 1 cars.
I mean, I wouldn't even call this minute, considering that I think in Spa it affected Leclerc, and in Sao Paulo it affected Sainz. They both had to pit early. And in fact, thinking about things that have affected Ferrari's brakes, I would say, if we look back, I think at the beginning of the year, something I just remember randomly was Alonso had a sandwich wrapper, stuck in his brakes. And that's what caused this race to end, I think. So that's how Alpine, was doing at the time.
Well, let's not even get started on how Alpine's reliability has affected Alonso this year.
I swear, yeah.
That guy has 41.
Must be around 41, 42. I think he's 42.
And he's driving like he's a 25-year-old guy.
He's been driving for as long as Yuki's been born.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alonso is 41 to turn 42 next year.
Let's not even get started on that. But I think I wanna talk about, for the last few minutes of our stream,
Right.
I want to talk about the driver market because you brought it up. We saw quite a few changes, and we're going to see quite a few new faces on the grid next year. Not only quite a few faces, we're going to see quite a few what do you call, pairings next year. It's going to be very interesting to say the least. We've got the new pairings that we've got, of course, Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon down at Alpine, forming an all-French lineup for an all-French team. We've got K-Mag alongside Nico at Haas. We've got Oscar alongside Lando at McLaren. And what's the other? Obviously, Ocon and Fernando Alonso at Aston Martin. And what's the last one? Williams, Logan Sargent, hopefully Logan Sargent asterisk at Logan Sargent's name, alongside Alex Albon at Williams. Which driver pairing or which battle between the teammates are you most excited to see?
Very honestly, I'm still excited to see if
Perez. Sorry to interrupt. We forgot one person: Yuki Tsunoda and Nick Debris.
Yep, I think. Speaking about Yuki and Nick, and speaking about what I was coming to literally was Perez. I'm interested to see if Perez keeps his seat for far too long. I understand that. See, the thing is that we get such limited information as fans. Probably, I would say we get 10% information about motorsport, of which 1% is actual knowledge. So there is so much we miss out on. So even when people say, oh, there's a dispute in Red Bull, oh, it's now clarified. We're just reading articles, right? So my personal opinion is Nick is there to take Perez's seat. See, the thing is, if we look back at, Bottas and Lewis and how they dominated through the hybrid era, it's important to see how Bottas was in no way a safety net, at least in the beginning, He was a proper top tier driver, which they made into a second place driver, I would say,
Correct.
So Perez is, in my opinion, in no way a second place driver. He's like just a safety net, maybe far lower than that. Their aim, I would say, as thinking about how Red Bull is their aim is to get another top tier driver like Nick, provided he does good in his first season, in that seat and making it an all Dutch lineup. True, making it a complete world championship lineup.
I was just about to say that world championship lineup.
So that's gonna be very interesting. And I don't think Nick would play way too difficult with Max. That wouldn't play too well in his favor. So I'm just curious to see how badly Yuki does against Nick, because I think Nick is gonna annihilate Yuki. Sorry for saying this out loud.
No.
That's the way.
I think majority of the people have been thinking about how Nick is going to kind of. I think he's got not a lot of pressure, I would say, but he's got quite a few things riding on his back after a fantastic race weekend at Monza with Williams. And I think had he been given another race weekend, I don't think his what do you call
expectancy level?
No, yes, his expectancy level would be there. Just my opinion. It's just that he was put in a position with the Williams where it was such an interesting and mixed conditioned race. So
quick question.
Who do you think he would?
Quick question. Who do you think is going to do better, Nick or Tsunoda? Simple.
Nick.
Good option.
I'd say Franz Tost.
I'd say
Franz Tost.
I would say, actually, what just comes to mind? It just struck a bell that Mattia might not even be there for next season. So,
are we going there?
It's gonna be quite interesting to see who might be the replacement. We're talking about the team principal of Ferrari here, guys.
Yeah.
So let's see who might that be.
In talks, obviously Frederic Vasseur, who's the Alfa Romeo current team principal. he's the leading contender for that role right now as we speak, taking over in January. But I can't believe Ferrari actually took the time out to refute that.
I mean,
Like they literally took the time out to say, guys, नहीं, अपन ने नहीं किया कुछ भी, अपन को कुछ नहीं पता. But bro, वो डैनी रिक के साथ भी हुआ था. Danny Rick after France was saying the same thing. Okay, to be fair, he said, "I am not leaving. I am seeing the end of my contract." Cut to 2 months later, guys, we have mutually agreed to depart ways.
I mean, speaking about team principles, even earlier we saw Otmar, right, say that, oh, I don't know what these rumors are about, not confirming, in public that
Moving
it's
to Alpine
false. And then he just went.
Yeah, dude. And then we had Mike Crack take over Aston. Cracked the team only fully. Made him crack so much that Vettel's like, bro, I was here for a multi-year contract.
Goodbye.
In 2 years. He was, when he signed an Aston Martin in 2020, it was supposed to be for 2021 and beyond. A multi-year contract.
Beyond men out of F1.
Bye, bro. What else? But before we go, just a quick shout out to the people who joined. Sharan, thank you so much. Danny Rick is now Red Bull Reserve Driver for 2023 as confirmed. Yes, we know Helmut Marko has confirmed it at Sky Germany, but also, fun fact, he's also said that Lawson will be the official reserve driver for AlphaTauri and Red Bull. However, Danny Rick will be used for like showcases and marketing, which I think he's got the flair, he's got the air,
right.
He's got the charm. Might as well go for it, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, thank you to everyone that joined. Before we go, any quick thoughts about Abu Dhabi?
I mean, I really don't like this track much. I think it's just so much money.
Even after turn 5 and turn 6 being modeled into turn 5?
It's just like, yeah, okay, this track is there in the calendar. Let's just deal with it. It's got a little, it's got a building that goes across the track. I'm not a fan of this track, really. Not much.
Fair enough.
I think there are quite a few better tracks.
Predictions. Will Checo get P2 in the championship?
I hope he's still there in Red Bull.
Will Max Verstappen say, I am not going to be doing this anymore? Please do not ask this from me.
I really hope Leclerc gets P2 simply because that guy has just had such a sad, depressing season at this point that getting P2 would really help him out. Even last race, he was asking for his team to switch places. I mean, understandable that it's for a podium, but every point matters, every point counts, but too sad. Really too sad. So
very, very sad.
I mean, even Russell's in that fight. If you go to see mathematically, he just needs to win and hope that Perez and Leclerc both crash out.
Yeah. I think right now Leclerc is obviously leading with podiums, and that podium would come into play if they crash out. But I don't think that'll happen. I think we'll have a fair fight, and hopefully Max Verstappen sticks to his word by saying, I will help Checo at Abu Dhabi. And Checo is not wrong in getting furious in the media. He's not wrong in saying that guy has 2 world championships because of me. Not because of you completely. I think that was a bit too far. But I think this year he dominated. I think, let's put it this way. He had already climbed 2 steps. The third step was not on Checo's back, but he definitely held Checo's hand.
Okay, fair enough.
Like if it's a top step of the podium and there are 3 steps to get there, he climbed those first 2 steps himself. I'm not saying Checo picked him up and took him to the 3rd step, but I can say that in the last 2 years, he definitely held Checo's hand to get to the 3rd step.
So, what I'll just say to this is that I can't name a single championship year where the driver who's been crowned champion has not been helped or has not been top priority of team.
Obviously, so biggest wingman being, 2 biggest wingmans being Rubens Barrichello and Valtteri Bottas.
True. So, I don't see the whole, the rave right now. It's probably just because the fan base has blown up ever since, the past 2-3 years for who knows what reason, right?
Yeah.
So because of that, I feel like there's just a lot more people saying the same thing that's been on, not nice to do a driver swap, but it is what it is. And you need to get a championship at the end of the day. We saw what happened in 2008, right? When they were unwilling to help each other out. They both lost the championship. So
Yep.
you
Yep.
just don't want a repeat of that. That's all.
You know, I mean, um, let's not even get started with 97,
Yeah.
98, Mick Schumacher, Villeneuve. That's another day story. But
Right.
anyway, thank you to everyone that joined. Thank you, Sharan, in the chat. Thank you to everyone that posted in the chat. Yes, Sharan, we know multi-year. I mean, 2 years is technically a multi-year deal, but that's not what we had in mind when we heard he's going to be doing a multi-year deal with Aston Martin. It pays the bills, yes, very well it does. But thank you to everyone that joined. We are Pundits Sports. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We've got Jamie Shaw Racing's Instagram in the description below. Don't forget to check him out on Instagram. He posts amazing F1 content. And please fuel his drive. Fuel his drive.
Thank
We'll
you.
get there. We'll
Let's
hopefully
go.
get there. I completely forgot to ask something, but I really want to touch upon it really
Go for
quick for the last 5 minutes. Jamie, how was your JK Tire Nationals?
It was brilliant. I mean, 4 words to sum it up was a great experience, poor results. And it was very much expected. Long story short, there were a few ups and downs we faced, within the team. And I think the best thing is that we know what went wrong.
That's
So
good.
the only thing beyond that is to, we've identified it. Number one, tick. Number two is to solve it. Number three is to, get the final result. So we're working towards it, and let's see what happens.
Well done. We're excited to see what Mr. Jamie Shaw has next, and we'll obviously keep you guys updated as we keep all of our guests, all of our followers updated with our guests. And don't forget to check him out for some amazing stuff. That's it from us at Couch Pundit Sports. We will see you after Abu Dhabi on Tuesday. Have a good rest of your night.
You guys, bye-bye.
Dhaval, bye. Sorry, Dhaval just came on the chat. So Dhaval, bye. And we're clear.